Hey you guys, Mr. Morris here. So I'm going to walk you through creating a line graph for mission 1, specifically option A, which is, if you chose option A, you're choosing to graph the daylight hours of 2 different cities in the world and find out how many hours during the day the sun is shining. So, as you can see here, I have my doc, which you have in Google Classroom in mission 1, option A. And I have my graph, which you have a copy of this as well. See, just like yours, totally blank. All right, we're going to fill that out together. All right, so let's take a look at the first page of the doc here. So you can see there's a series of instructions at the top of the doc, which I went through, I followed, and I found the daylight hours for Stanhope, New Jersey, for the 15th of every month throughout the year. And as you can kind of see here, you know, during the winter, there's less daylight. 9 hours and 32 minutes in January. And then during the summer, there's more. So in June, there's over 15 hours of daylight, which I think makes sense if you think about it. All right. And then I continued here to fill in my information. Now, after you find the Stanhope data, the Stanhope information, if you keep following the directions, you want to pick another city in the world. So I chose a city in Norway. Oslo is the name of the city. It's one of the options I gave you up here. You can pick one of those, or you can choose, your own. And I went to time B. I did the same exact thing. I just went for Oslo, and I found the amount of daylight hours in Oslo throughout the year. So things are a little bit different. We're not going to really think about it now. We're going to put it on a graph and see if the graph shows us anything. All right. So before I put anything on this graph, you guys, I just want to tell you this video is meant to be kind of your guide for this station. So I want you to watch it through, but then I want you, as you're making this graph, you can do the graph exactly like I make it here. The information needs to be for the city that you choose, but otherwise all of the steps of making a line graph, we're going to go right through. So you can work with this video, you can pause it, you can rewind it, you can start it and stop it, and I want you to just use this video to kind of walk you through the steps of this. The first step is the easiest step. You need to put your name on it so we know whose graph this is. So I'm going to put right here, as you can see, Mr. Morris, that's me, nice to meet you. All right, that goes right in the little name box. So the next step that we have to do here is we have to label what's called an axis of the graph. So we learned about an axis on the planet Earth. And an axis in the Earth is that invisible line that goes straight through the middle of the Earth. So an axis on a graph, you guys, is similar. It's a line that goes through the middle of the graph. So I'm going to outline right here the 2 axes, as we call them, of the graph. All right, so those 2 blue lines right there are 2 axes. Now, there are 2 different types. You can see there's one that goes up and down like this, and there's one that goes side to side down here. The one down here is called the x-axis, and I'm not, you don't have to remember this. Well, you will at some point, but not right now. You can see I wrote it down here on the bottom for you. All right, that's the x-axis. And the one that goes up and down is called the y-axis. All right, that's the y-axis right there. You can see that. You gotta get in focus. There it is. All right. So there's a very easy way to remember this, and this is how I always remember it. If you make the letter Y, I'll do it right here so you can see. You have those 2, the V up there, and then you draw a line straight down, right? And that makes a Y. So you can remember that little line shows you that it's the y-axis. All right. Now we have to label the x-axis and the y-axis here. So again, remember, you can do this exactly like I do it. So if we are on the x-axis, the one going side to side, as you kind of move up through the grades here, you're going to find that x-axis is mostly the time used to indicate time. So in this case, we are looking at time, but we're looking at time across the course of an entire year, right? So as you look at this doc right here, you can see that time for us is measured by January, February, March, April, May, blah, 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 all the way to December. So this graph is designed so that every 2 little lines across right here is going to be 1 month. So I'll show you how to do this. Start right here at the end. All right, we're going to count 2 lines. 1, 2. That is going to be where we write January. I'm just going to write Jan, J-A-N. It's just a little bit shorter. You're going to find if you write these things too big here, they're going to get crunched together and you're going to get confused. So 2 lines is Jan for January. We go there, we count another 2 lines. Just watch my pen here. 1, 2, and that's February. So I'll write Feb. Count 2 more. 1, 2. That is March. 1, 2. That is April. So I'm going to pause the video. I'm going to fill in the rest of my graph here, the x-axis, so you don't have to watch me do every step, but you should be doing the same thing. Hey you guys, so as you can see here, I have labeled my x-axis with all of the months of the year. We've got January, February, March, April, May, blah, 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 all the way August, September, October, November, all the way to December. You can see I abbreviated it where I could so that you kind of save some space. Now, we have to label up the y-axis, all right? So we are going to label up the y-axis the amount of daylight hours that we might have sunlight. So this one's kind of easy. There's a minimum amount of daylight hours and there's a maximum. So the least number of hours there could be daylight in a day is 0, right? Totally 0. And the most is the total amount of hours in a day, 24. So what we are going to do, we don't need to count lines this time. We're just going to label each line going up here the next number up, the next amount of daylight hours in a day. So you can do this exactly like I do this. We have a 0. Next line is 1. Next line is 2. Next line is 3. Next line is 4. And you're just going to keep going up until you get to 24. All right? So keep on labeling. Just keep going 1 number per line. All right, so I have labeled now each possible hour of the day moving up from 0 all the way up to 24. All right, you guys, your graph right now, you can pause the video if you're not there yet, but should look exactly like this. Besides that giant Y right there, you don't have to have that. All right, so now what we're going to do is we're going to label these axes. You can see that there's a line x-axis label right here. We have that blank so far. So what that's asking is, what are we showing with this line? And we're going from January to December, so what we're showing is time. And I'm going to write in here, and you should too, we're showing time in months. So we're going to write time in months right there. All right? On the y-axis label, we have 0 through 24. So what the heck are we showing there? Well, we're showing daylight hours. We're going to be measuring how many hours the sun is out in each of these 2 cities. All right, our graph is labeled and ready to go. So now what we are going to do is we're going to start what we call plotting our data points on our graph. And you can see we have a ton of data here. We already found this stuff. All right, we have Stanhope, we have Oslo, we have hours and minutes of the day. I'm going to show you exactly how to do this. As we go through Stanhope, remember, you should have Stanhope too, or Sparta. Your information is going to be exactly, it should be the same as mine. All right, so your Stanhope graph should be very, very, very similar, if not the exact same as mine. So here we go. In Stanhope, as I'm looking at my information, in January, and we can just say January because all of the months are the 15th, so we don't need to always say January 15th, February 15th. We can just say January. So in January, we have 9 hours and 32 minutes of daylight, which is just about 9.5 hours of daylight. So we're going to find January on our graph right here, the very first line on the x-axis, and we're going to count up to, there's 9, and there's 10. We're going to put a dot right about in between 9 and 10, because it's about 9.5 hours of daylight. All right? So that's our first data point. Now, we're going to look at February. February, there's 10 hours and 36 minutes of daylight. So that is in between 10 and 11 hours, right? Guys, this doesn't need to be exact. You don't need to try to pick the spot where 36 minutes would be. But you just want it to be between between 10 and 11. So we're going to go to the February line. We're going to count up. Here's the 10 line. Here's the 11 line. We're going to put a dot right in between there. All right. Next, we're going to look at March 15th. So in March, there are, and I'm looking right here, there's March. There are 11 hours and 51 minutes of daylight. So just about 12 hours of daylight in March. So we're going to find March. We're going to go up. We're going to put a dot right about at 12. All right. Next, we're going to do the same thing in April. So in April, right here, 13 hours and 15 minutes of daylight. So over 13 hours of daylight in April. So we're going to find April. We're going to count up to 13. Just put the dot a little bit above 13. So you can see on our graph here, and this might make sense, you guys, as you go from January to April, we're getting into the spring. Right now, the days are getting longer, right? So that's what our graph is showing us so far. So I'm going to pause the video here again, and I'm going to graph the rest of my months, and hopefully we'll be able to see a pattern for daylight hours in Stanhope. All right, so I'm back here. I graphed all of the points for Stanhope for the whole year. So you can see our little dots here. They kind of go up, right? And then back down. It kind of looks like a hill. So what that's showing us is that in winter, January, February, this time, the days are shorter. And then as you get into summer, the days get longer. And then all of a sudden you hit June there, and then the days start to get shorter again. All right, which is something I know that we've all experienced. So now we're going to get a little color in our graph, all right? We are going to pick one colored marker. I'm going to pick blue. And we're going to just connect the dots. Make a line. So now you can really see the shape of this graph, and you can see how it goes up and then goes back down again throughout the whole year. All right. So that is the daylight hours for Stanhope. So we have made a line graph. Congratulations, you guys. If you're at this point, you've created a line graph. Now, we're not done yet. We have Stanhope's information on here. Now we have to put our other city. So I can get rid of this paper for Stanhope. I chose Oslo. You may have chose Oslo. You may have chose one of these cities. You may have chosen something totally different. But I have all of this information for Oslo. It's not the exact same numbers as Stanhope, but we're going to do the exact same thing that we did with Stanhope with the Oslo information. So I'm going to look at Oslo in January, right here. January, 6 hours and 41 minutes of daylight, less than 7 hours of daylight in January. So I am going to find January. I'm going to look up. I'm going to put a dot just below 7 hours, because it was between 6 and 7 hours, all right, of daylight in Oslo in January. Next, we're going to find February. In February, it jumps up to about 9 hours of daylight. So I am going to put a little dot right here, just above 9 hours. In March, there's 11 hours and 38 minutes of daylight, so not quite 12 hours, but a little more than 11 hours. So I'm going to put a dot right there. All right, in April, right here in April, there are 14 hours and 26 minutes of daylight. So between 14 and 15 hours of daylight. So in Oslo, that sun is starting to stay out longer and longer and longer. All right, I'm going to pause the video. I'm going to fill in the rest of my information for Oslo. Hello. All right, I'm back. I graphed all of these points for Oslo. All right, so what we're going to do now is we're going to take a different color. I'm choosing yellow. And again, we're going to connect those dots. All right. All right, folks, so we have now finally done our graph. If you are at this point, congratulations. You have made a line graph with 2 lines of data on it, which is pretty cool. All right, so you can see the difference here between Stanhope and Oslo. And what this graph tells me is that in the winter, Oslo has less daylight than Stanhope. All right, there's really not that much, not that many hours during the day where the sun is shining in Oslo in the winter. But in the summertime, the sun is out in Oslo for about 18 hours a day. So there's only 6 hours in Oslo where you can sleep at night. Well, I guess you can sleep more, but it's only 6 hours where the sun is not out, which is really kind of interesting. All right, if you look at the globe on your table, you might want to think about a reason why that might be the case based on the stuff that we've learned. Now, we have 2 more steps, and then we are sour cream and Dunions. All right? So first, we need to label our key right up here. This is sometimes called a legend. We're going to call it a key. All this is, guys, is if I'm looking at my graph, I made it. I know what it means. But if somebody else looks at this, they're like, well, what the heck does the blue and the yellow mean? I don't get it. What's happening? All right? So we want to make sure that they know what those 2 things mean. So we're going to take our color that we used first. I used blue. I'm just going to make a little blue circle right up here, and I'm going to label that Stanhope. So people know that that information is from Stanhope, New Jersey, where we are. Then I'm going to take my yellow marker. You can take whatever color you chose for the second graph. Make a little circle, and I'm going to label that one Oslo, Norway. All right? Last step. We just need to create a title for our graph. So you can use this title. You can use this title as well, or you can try to make up your own. You can check with me if you're not sure about it. What I'm going to call this, because this shows us the daylight hours throughout an entire year, I'm going to call this graph, and I know the title is a little bit boring, but graph titles usually are. Daylight hours over 1 year. All right, so that is what I'm going to call it. Ladies and gentlemen, if you are at this point, you are done. Good job. I just want to remind you, if this is the first time you're watching this video, when you go back to make this graph, put this video on right with you while you make it. All right, pause it, rewind it, fast forward, whatever you need to do. Just work through your graph along with this video so you can follow all of these steps that I went through with you here, okay? All right, if you are done with your graph, good job, congratulations. You have shown us the amount of daylight hours in 2 different cities in the world. All right, you guys, goodbye.